Martin Luther King, Ralph David Abernathy, and the Civil Rights Movement. And we will hear so much more about these fabulous people, but please give it up for Donzale Abernathy. And last, but certainly not least, is my baby sister, the youngest daughter of two, to Reverend Al and Kathy Jordan Sharpton, Ashley Sharpton, an aspiring media proprietor and community organizer. In 2009, Ashley founded Sharpton Entertainment, an entertainment company specializing in showcase production, scouting, branding, and promotions. In 2013, Ashley delved into the worlds of social media and activism. In addition to running her own entertainment company, she became director of social media communications at Massenburg Media. Shortly after, Reverend Sharpton himself brought Ashley in to expand his personal and radio show social network presence. She was also instrumental in enhancing National Action Network's Youth Move and Youth Huddle's social media presence, in which she founded an initiative and associated with the National Action Network called The Huddle in December 2013. The Huddle is a meeting place for youth and young adults to act on their dreams, develop, lead, and empower. The Huddle is free to attend, includes dinner, and seeks to assist with the social, intellectual, academic, physical, and cultural development of youth who aspire to be their best selves. Please welcome Ms. Ashley Sharpton. So I share this view with my fellow children of the movement, but we all have a personal view on the most historic civil rights figures in history. We have really a remarkable seat at the table, and it's really our duty as the children of the movement to be that bridge from those real-life people to the foot soldiers who will keep and have continued and carried out these legacies of our parents, but also these activists we refer to as the icons of the civil rights movement. So I'm going to begin the discussion. It's always important, as we've heard, I'm sure our parents say a lot of times, it's important to be defined, but it's also more important to define ourselves. So, how do you define yourself? Donzale?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today. How I define myself, first and foremost, is as an artist. I'm an actress, and I enjoy making a living as an actress. However, by the circumstances of my birth, I'm a child of the civil rights movement. To whom much is given, much is expected. Therefore, I don't have the luxury to be no one and to go mindlessly through life. I have a moral and a social obligation to be a part of the community, to try and create solutions in the community, to come downstairs from upstairs and listen to what was said in the previous panel, to be a voice, and to go into the community and help. And so that's exactly what I do. And one of the things I do want to say is that I'm dealing with the probation system in Los Angeles, California. And one of the solutions we've found has been truancy. And young people and older people, I want you all to understand the police do not have the right to treat us any kind of way that they treat us. And you all were right to speak up a few moments ago in this room and to express your opinions to the police commissioners. They need to know that this country does not need to be a police state and that they don't treat white children the same way they treat black children.
Ashley, you, it said in your bio that you formed the Huddle, a place for young people to come and really delve into exploring who they are. How did that idea, I guess, come about? Was it something that you personally felt driven to do, or was it something you felt obligated to do in order to actually have a place in the movement?
I guess both. First, a name, we've always been a part of the name, Dominique and I, and a group of young people. Mary Pat Hector, a national youth director, is here. But in New York City, there was always a lack of youth, I felt. And I felt like it was our duty to be responsible for that. At first, I used to run away from that, and it goes to answer the first question as defining yourself. I used to run away from Sharpton and Al Sharpton's daughter because I looked, everyone my whole life was like, oh, you look just like your father, you act just like your father. So it was a nuisance at first. I didn't like it. I used to run away from it, and I used to be like, oh my God, my name is Ashley, please. But I had to learn to embrace it because that's a part of me. Ignoring that is ignoring a part of myself. So I was disservicing myself by neglecting that part of myself. And Huddle actually has helped me more than I feel I've helped the youth. They've helped me to become myself and to find my purpose and to find my mission in life. And I feel like it is my duty to be responsible for that aspect in Action Network as a young person and a young adult. So yes, I feel like it's both.
Ms. Bernice King, a lot of the times, and you can talk a lot about this, we're constantly known as the daughter of, the son of, and you have definitely been one who has broken that situation. Can you speak to, like, what is our duty as children of, do we have a place to lead the movement? Should we find our place? Like, what exactly, how can you speak to your place and how you've been able to evolve and be your own individual self and do great things and accomplish great things outside of being just the daughter of or the son of? Can you speak to those experiences in your journey?
Yes. First and foremost, I define myself as a citizen of the kingdom of God. And secondly, as the daughter of an incredible legacy that I inherited from both my parents, not just my father. I always tell people that the Martin Luther King Jr. that we revere today, that we know today, would not have been at the iconic level that he is had it not been for Coretta Scott King.
That's right.
And so I define her as the architect of the King legacy.
That's right.
But with that said, I praise God for the mother that I had. She was an incredible example of unconditional love and forgiveness and service to humanity. And one of the things she ensured as we were growing up is that we understood that you don't have to be your daddy and you don't have to be me. My only requirement is that you be your best self. Now, that did not automatically translate immediately into us or me specifically not feeling the pressure of being their children. But it gave me a guide, and it gave me a sense of comfort, because at the end of the day, I knew that my mother's expectation is that I be my best Bernice. And so I went through stages and phases of really trying to run away from the identity. In fact, one of the reasons that I went to law school is to ensure that I had my own sense of identity when I was called to the ministry at 17. And so once I completed law school, that's like, okay, this is my thing, even though I've never practiced law. But I could if I want to. I just want to set the record straight. I am barred and an active member of the State Bar of Georgia. But with that said, you know, after running for so long and reconciling my calling as I have matured, I've come to a place to recognize the incredible responsibility that I have to advance my parents' legacy. At one stage running from it, but now surrendering to it gladly, because I understand that I sit between two generations, and I have to serve as a bridge in hearing and trying to connect those generations so that the sacrifices that my parents and Gonzale's parents and everybody on this panel's parents made to ensure that we continue the spirit of that struggle, because that movement, whether we agree with it or not, was successful at the end of the day. In its time, it was successful. They were not called to cure all of the social ills that we are faced with. But we spent too much time not ensuring that the next generation understood those sacrifices. And so now I find myself situated in a place of trying to make sure that we make those connections, because I think if we're going to continue what has started, then we must make the connection. I'm going to close with this because I share everywhere I go. My mother said something, and I want you to wrestle with this. Some people disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm used to disagreement. But she said, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it in every generation. And so that has comforted me when I've seen things that have happened recently with police brutality, with the Voting Rights Act basically being gutted, with fair housing now being threatened. to understand that we are being called in this generation to make a contribution to the freedom struggle. And no matter who you are, we're all born into it. No one is exempt. You may personally opt out, but generationally, we all have a call to make a contribution to this freedom struggle.
I do want to introduce, we have Kwame Abernathy, who has joined our panel as well. So Kwame, welcome, and thanks for joining us. Donzale's brother. So thanks for joining us. Malak Shabazz. Malak is one of the twins who was in Dr. Betty's stomach when your father, Malcolm X, was assassinated. And so you actually never met your father personally, right? But you've always had to be, I guess, recognized as the daughter of Malcolm X. Can you speak to that? I know that we've had a lot of discussions about this, throughout our lives. Malak is like a big sister to me and one of my mentors as well. Can you speak to how it was defining yourself, being the daughter of Malcolm
Absolutely.
X and Dr. Betty, and how, a little bit about your journey, how you have evolved to this amazing humanitarian and activist today?
Well, first of all, you're a goddaughter of my mother. Secondly, anybody who thinks that I did not know my father, they disrespect my mother, thinking that she didn't teach me. Because anybody who was a student at Medgar Evers College knows that she said, "Am I clear?" Anybody know about Medgar Evers? Thank you. The only historical black college in the state of New York. Dr. Betty. And you, too. Her blessings. You were the other extra two. Crumb snatchers. Loved you tremendously. My mother raised 6 girls in the climate of hate. And let's all get real on that in 1965 if you understand the history. If you understand the time, these people who were being miseducated by Puffy and Jay-Z and whatever, look, it's all good. They're minstrels and entertainment. But right now we need education. And we need understanding about what the history and the shoulders that they're standing on. Okay, a lot of them don't know that. They just don't get it. We are children of people who made sure we were educated. They weren't having it. I couldn't come home with less than a B+, Lord Jesus. And I'm a Muslim and I'm singing whatever. I'm just saying, it's all about interfaith. It's all about interfaith because you know what? Racism and terrorism does not have a religion. So we need to get over that stuff. We really do. It's Christianity, it's Islam, it's Judaism, whatever. We need to understand. My father put his faith in his back pocket. The lyncher wasn't thinking about if you were a Christian or a Muslim. He saw a black man and was going to lynch you anyway. So let's get real on that. So we need to really understand where black people are going, where people of color are going, and how we can understand each other for religious intolerance, basically. But when Dominique called me, I was on my oldest sister, Oxala Shabazz. She's an ambassador. She said, we have to give back to human global service because this is what Mommy and Daddy did. She called me, I was in Glasgow, Scotland. They thought Malcolm X was Scottish. Remember Dominique?
Yes.
I was in Liverpool. There's only 3 documents, exhibits in Liverpool. It's Malcolm X, the North Atlantic slave trade and John Lennon. They think Malcolm X is from Liverpool. But the thing was, their focus is on consciousness and the North Atlantic slave trade. What are we doing to focus on the North Atlantic slave trade? This year is the International Decade of People of African Descent. How many people know that? Are there hands up? Thank you. I don't see a lot. But we need to know that. Black people in this country need to know of the African diaspora, what is going on. And this conference is showing the African diaspora. And these daughters are putting forth the new generation so they understand what is going on for people of African descent. We need to understand that. Excuse me? Okay. I'm just saying, why isn't this taught in our schools?
That's true. That's right.
Al Sharpton's daughters are bringing this to the forefront, and they're younger than me, and I'm 50. This is 5090, the 50th anniversary of Malcolm X's assassination, 90th of his birthday. A lot of people don't know that either, but that's okay. But I'm glad that my sisters here at least allowed me to come here to express myself with the Abernathys, with Dr. King's daughter, which I know her very well, Auntie Coretta, God bless her soul. God bless her soul, please.
Thank you, Malak. Jemida, you've been very vocal in the organization, the organizational aspect of really carrying on this torch and continuing this legacy, of course, that your notable parents were pioneers of. Can you speak a little bit to your experience? What drove you to really want to be involved? We don't hear a lot, from the children of these notable icons. Speak a little bit to your journey and what helped you define yourself, and what paved your way to becoming who you are today and where you're heading.
I think the difference between me and the other siblings on the panel is that my father was behind the scenes. And a lot of people, unless you knew what they call him leader, you didn't know him. My dad was one of the first field staffers hired by Dr. King, and he was a part of the advance team to go out into a city before Dr. King came into the city. And in the movie Selma, the big guy was him. I think that I don't know anything else but to do what I do. My dad always stayed involved, and he always did something to help the least of these. And so this is just, it's what I do. I don't know anything else but to do this. To be in the community, to stay involved, and to keep God first in our lives. And I just don't know, I don't know how anybody else survives without going out into the community and being active. And so it defines me because I also had the pleasure, of just being able to be a normal kid. So I got to do stuff a lot of y'all couldn't do. I'm sorry. But it allowed me, and they allowed me to be who I was. And when, like Elder King said, when you come from parents who allow you to say, this is you, but you realize you do have a strong cross to bear. And you step into the role easily. It's not something, it was just an automatic step. There are some things that go on that I just don't understand. And you step into it, and you looking like if you go to help somebody, you standing there just like they are. I don't know what to do. But you're there to help, and so I just don't know anything else but to follow my legacy and to keep it moving.
Thank you. Kwame, I'm piggybacking off a little bit of what Jemida said. Abernathy, that's definitely like King or Sharpton. Those names, are pretty rare. Or King is not rare, but I'm sure that you always get, Bernice, of course, if you give your ID or something, they're like, oh, any relation? We get that a lot. But Kwame, you are the son of one of the notable icons of civil rights in history. How was it growing up being the son of? Can you speak a little bit to your journey and experiences? Jemida was saying that there were some things that she was able to do because her father was someone who was kind of in the background, and someone who was not really vocal or really seen all the time. But can you speak a little bit to your experiences? Were there certain things that you were confined of being able to do, or did you have challenges defining your purpose in life? Could you speak a little bit to your experiences and your journey?
Hello, everyone. How are you all? On this fine, fine afternoon, I'm Kwame Lutuli Abernathy. Kwame, named after Kwame Nkrumah. Lutuli, named after Chief Albert Lutuli. Both of the people that I was named after were assassinated. Both of the people that I was named after were African leaders. Both of the people that I was named after predated the Civil Rights Movement. I was born on July the 3rd. My parents, my father said if I'm going to have a son, my last child, to be born on this close to Independence Day, he's going to have an African name. And those were the choices, and I guess my legacy began with my name, all parts of my name, Kwame Lutuli and Abernathy. Abernathy is not the most important part for me. My mother did not allow any of her children to have nicknames. So early on, as being the youngest child of 4 and the youngest son, and my brother and I look an awful lot alike, I grew up spending, there's about 10 years difference between myself and my brother and I. So oftentimes people would say, hey, Abernathy, or hey, Lil Ralph. And my brother's name is Ralph David Abernathy III. And of course, my cross is a little different from his, but we still carry that burden. Like Bernice said, and like Jemida said, I struggled for a long time trying to find some space in my identity, because my identity as a pastor's son, I lived in a fishbowl as the son of, I lived in a fishbowl. I went to private school my entire time from kindergarten all the way through. I was one of maybe 2 or 3 black kids, certainly one of 2 black boys in any classroom all the way through. So it was always being one of or something of. And the spotlight, like these lights here, that's all that I know. And the legacy, as Jemida said, is all that I know. It's all that my family knows. It's all that we all here know. It's something that we were teethed on, something that was bred in us. The ability to protest, we got it honestly. To see a situation and have an opinion about it. Or to be opinionated and not allow anybody to quiet you or to shut you up. We all got that the honest way. And as I move and as we move actually in 2015 and beyond, and in my 40s, and hopefully what God will be generous enough to give me more time, It's connecting the lessons that I learned from creating that space and trying to do something moving forward to help the next generation. And when I say the next generation, I don't mean teenagers. I mean kids that are in elementary school. Because we've got to, as people always tell us, you got to start young. We have to start as young as absolutely possible and challenging their minds, challenging how they see themselves and how they see themselves in us. I guess that's enough of an introduction. But last thing I did want to say is that Jemida, in that trying to get some space from my legacy, I oftentimes would not introduce myself as Kwame Abernathy, but I introduced myself as Kwame, and in that way I could get people to focus on my first name, how to correctly pronounce my first name, and then two, I could slide by and then hang out without having to hear, well, isn't that, and shouldn't you, and you don't need to be, and which, and as a young person, you want to grow up, and you want to experience all of the things that you should or should not experience, or at least say that you did, even if you didn't. But, I don't want to say I ran from it, but it was something that I kept private to try to create some space for myself. But, at the appropriate moment, the lights come on, and, it's a life that, only life that I know.
Now, I do have this one more question, and then I want to get into exactly who we are. But since we're on it, I do want to know a little bit about your parents. So what is Bernice, you can start. What is something we don't know about your mom or dad that you shared, or that you can share with us? Something that we don't know or didn't know that wasn't always portrayed in the media or written in history. It could be funny, or it could be anything. It's something we don't know.
Okay. It's kind of hard with my dad because it seems like everything's getting out.
I do, Mom.
Let me say with him though, something that some people may know, but I think it's very important for young people to know. Obviously, my father went to college at age 15 at Morehouse, and he was 15, so he was still kind of developing. Of course, he loved a good party. He loved to dance. That was very difficult being a minister, a prominent minister's son. They used to call him Tweed on campus because he loved to wear these tweed jackets. But he made a C in public speaking. And when he went to theology school, where he ultimately graduated valedictorian from Crozier Theological Seminary, he made a C in preaching. I know those professors, they're real embarrassed. They were real embarrassed. I mean, and I tell young people that don't let anybody define you, period, and certainly not by a grade, your destiny. That's one perspective, and they were totally off. But in terms of my mother had somewhat of a temper growing up. When she was probably around 8, 9, maybe 10 or so, she had a favorite cousin that she spent a lot of time with, a male cousin. And one day they were together, and she had an axe. And, I think he kind of dared her, and my mother kind of, gave in to the dare and hit him upside the head, and ended up hitting him, and some of the skin came off. And so she makes this joke, here now I am years later as the person who is helping to carry the nonviolent legacy, but she wasn't always nonviolent, I can tell you that. She would beat some folks up.
Ashley,
Want me to go? One thing I can say about my dad is what you see is really what you get. Like, I know a lot of people feel like, you know, once you become successful, you have to puff up and, you know, do this and do that, and you have all these people behind you telling you what to say and all that. Reverend Sharpton is really Reverend Sharpton 24/7 hours of the day. It could be, I work with Reverend, I have the privilege to work with him in his, on his radio station. It's just me and him sometime in the studio. That's who you see on TV is who you see, what he feels, what he says what he means, and he means what he says. No matter if you feel like whoever twists it, turns it, he says what he means. He doesn't need someone to translate it for him. He says exactly what he feels. Since he was a little boy, he's preaching since he was 4 years old, never wrote a speech. So to have that much conviction, to know what you're saying without writing it down, that, I don't know if you guys speak, but that takes a lot. So in order to know that constantly, and he's spoken a long, long, long time, he's 60 years old now, so that he's made a lot of speeches and never written something down. So that's real. And that's probably what the teleprompter is hard to read because he's not used to reading the script. But at the end of the day, I just want to say he's really himself. He's him, and I've learned that for him to be genuine, tell the truth. And you tell the truth, you shame the devil. They can twist it how they want to, but that's what it is. And what you say, what you mean, don't change it. Mean what you say what you mean.
Malak? Consulate?
What I want you to know first and foremost is that my mother is in the room. Mother, will you please stand up? Stand up. Yeah. My mother was a teacher. She wrote the business plan for the Montgomery bus boycott. She was a business education teacher. Yeah, and she had more courage in her pinky than most of us have, and definitely more than I have. I love that my mother, you know, my dad and Uncle Martin would think one thing, and then my mother didn't have a problem letting them know she disagreed. My mother was one of those women who was out there, and she expressed herself. I love that, you know, the thing I think is, I'm blessed because I knew my mother and my father. I knew Bernice's mother and her. I knew her father. I knew them so well. I knew James Orange. I knew of your dad. I was blessed to be able to be old enough to grow up under them. Daddy and Uncle Martin were nonviolent. Mother and Aunt Coretta were not. Daddy and Uncle Martin were gone Monday through Friday, and when they would come home on Friday, they would make the home a sanctuary. And so we played games, and we spent our Saturdays together. My sister, myself, and Yolanda would take ballet. My brother Ralph III, Marty, and Dexter would have football, and then they would go get their hair cut. And then we'd all convene on Saturday evening where my mother would have cooked dinner because Uncle Martin liked the way Mother cooked. Uncle Retta used to make those runny eggs. Bernice, you know what I'm talking about. And I couldn't get behind that. But on Sunday, early in the morning, they'd go to their separate churches, and then after church, we would all reconvene, and it depended on whose church we would run to. And on first Sunday, the boys would run and get all of the Welch's grape juice, which was a communion, and then we'd have dinner at Pascal's on Sunday. And then they'd go visit the sick, and I would go with my dad to visit the sick, and then on Sunday evening, they'd reconvene in their little group called the Fellowship with ministers, and they'd all get together and re-preach the sermon that they had preached on Sunday morning and brag about what they did. And then on Saturday, and then Monday morning, when we'd have to get up and go to school, and I would go to school with Martin and Dexter and Ralph and Yoki and Wandlin, I would cry every time I'd say goodbye to my dad because I was afraid he was going to die. And he had taught us that the day would come when he would not walk back through the door. And see, your father had been assassinated, and they wanted us to understand. They did not spare us. They told us. They told us how Medgar Evers had been murdered And I'll never forget the day that Yolanda, myself, and Rena Evers stood on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, and Rena shared those moments of being trapped inside the house and her father outside and her mother not letting her go outside to him as he was lying there in the carport dying, and how it makes you feel. Well, my dad was a mathematician. My father could add numbers fast in his head than you can add them up on your calculator. That's why he was the treasurer of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That's why he was a professor at Alabama State. I know that, oh my God, when they would travel, my dad would sit on top of the money. When Daddy and Uncle Martin would travel, he would carry the money, and not a penny was ever lost. It was always accounted for. The other thing, I mean, there's so much people don't know about who my father was, but I want you all to understand that my father, the one thing that is real important that helped to shape him was that he was the son of a farmer, and Grandpa George, my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, was 12 years old when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. My Grandpa George, great-grandpa George, lived and grew up under something called Reconstruction. And he used to say to my father that justice would not always be denied to the Negro and that we will have freedom again. So with that instilled in my father, because Grandpa George lived longer than my father's father, my father knew that we had to rise up. And he used to say to my dad, when you see a fight, get in it, a good fight, but fight to win it. So my father's first boycott was at Linden Academy for the Inferior Science Department. His second boycott was where he was president of Alabama State University's student body president, and he protested. They boycotted the inferior food. And so my dad's third boycott would be the Montgomery bus boycott. And I loved, my mother always used to tell how Bernice's father, Uncle Martin, he was so dear. What you all didn't know was he was so always nervous, and he was a reluctant hero, and he used to bite his fingernails, and you all can see my cuticles. Uncle Martin bit his fingernails, and so I would bite my fingernails. I loved him so much. Your dad was so dear. They stabbed him in the chest here in New York City when his book came out, and he would have us climb all over him. And he would say, see, I was stabbed right here, and he'd show off the mark. And then he would say, we'd kiss him, and he said, and if I sneezed, I would have died. And then we were like, God is good, you're always going to be okay. But I know many stories. I'm just so blessed to have been able to have lived, to have grown up under them.
I do want, I'm allowed to.
Ooh. Wow, I was hoarse 2 days ago. Now my voice is back. I'm the youngest daughter. I was born during the trial of my father's assassination. So I'm the product of the mothers. And there's a lot of mothers in here. And a lot of people know Dr. Betty. Yes, thank you. 10 months, 22 hours of labor, and twins. Yeah, that's Dr. Betty. She raised 6 girls, 6 girls, 3 heart attacks, and 2 PhDs earned along the way, making sure that Medgar Evers College is the only historical black college in New York State. Let's give a proud, yeah. Dr. Betty, in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn. Merle Evers was one of the 20 subjects for the Freedom Sisters exhibit at the Shabbat Center. If anybody here went there, if not, well, I only hear a few hand claps, but, however, she stated that she had to scrub the blood off the backyard of the garage, so her children didn't see it. People don't understand, there was Malcolm, Medgar, and Martin. They're not even really recognizing Merle and Medgar. But I'm saying she scrubbed that blood so her children weren't devastated. Our children, Bernice, my family, we are survivors. And I am just so blessed that Dominique Sharpton is allowing us to be here and sponsor us and allow us to show that the next generation has not forgotten the shoulders that they stand on, because Dominique and Ashley Sharpton are paving the way for the next generation. A lot of them are not understanding that. We look at entertainment, but they have a legacy because their father, Al Sharpton, oh, please, already. Don't think that he's not snapping the fingers. He's setting forth a path for their daughters, but they're also putting forth for our next generation to understand where we have to go. We have to understand the legacy of the people of the show, not just Malcolm, Martin, Medgar, and Al Sharpton, but a lot of W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, all of them. And it's a blessing that we now have a young generation of young girls. Hello? Can we say that? Because I'm sorry, the brothers need to step up too, but the girls are going to the prison pipeline just as quick as the young boys are. We need to stop that damn pipeline. Yes or no? The girls are going, and then the children are taken away, putting in to foster care, and then they lose their rights for voting and everything else. Excuse me. Excuse Christine Parker. Anyway, I'm just saying, I'm blessed to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Malak. Before we go any further, I do have a couple more questions, and I know you want to hear more from the children of the movement, yes? But I want to bring forth our president and founder of National Action Network and my father at this time to bring some remarks to the panel, Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
Thank you. Let me say this. This has been a great opening day, and we've got more. But nothing we do this week is more important than this panel. When Dominique and Ashley said that they wanted to do this, and we said, fine. And we'll do it during the first day. It's because of, and I didn't even talk to them about it, I don't think that we as a nation has ever understood that when we raise icons like Dr. King, and Dr. Abernathy, and Malcolm, and Reverend James Orange, and all of them, that it was a family investment. They get up every morning having to live through the pain of their fathers giving their lives for us. And I wanted you to understand that to us, they were all of that, but they were daddy to them and never could be that full daddy because they were daddy for us. And many times we were so selfish we never understood that. I knew, I was too young to know Dr. King well. I met him twice when I was a kid in Breadbasket here. But I knew Mrs. King well because of Martin and I worked together, who'll be here tomorrow. And one of the things that was always striking to me is how much she loved her children. She came to our convention. She would speak for us every year. And she said to me one day, "You ever hear Bernice speak?" I said, "No, I've heard her do interviews. She's good." "No, you got to hear her preach." And I tease her, but it's the truth. Bernice is my favorite preacher. I'm serious. She can preach, and y'all know I know preaching. You know, I grew up under Bishop Washington, Gardner Taylor, and Bill Jones. And so if I say you can preach, you can preach. I'm not talking about talk or rhyme, but she can break down the homiletics and theology.
Yes, she can.
And weave it into a hip-hop generation. Than anybody out here now. But she grew up her formative years without a daddy for us. And too often we praise Dr. King and forget the pain she had to suffer, and Martin and Dexter. I remember one year at our convention, Bernice may not remember this, her mother said to me, "You know, it would mean a lot to Yolanda to perform at the Apollo." I said, "Really?" Now, I grew up in New York. Going to Apollo wasn't no big thing. We used to, you know, when I was a kid, we'd get online. My father, before he left us, and he bribed somebody to get at the head of the line and see James Brown. Later, I got to be like James Brown's son. So I said to our staff, I said, "You know, we got to arrange this for Mrs. King." And we rented the Apollo and took the whole convention. And Yolanda did a one-woman show. And Bernice flew in. And Martin was there. And it was like a family affair in the box as they watched Yolanda perform. Little did we know Yolanda would depart. But it was the love of Mrs. King for her children, because she understood that they grew up with a missing part of their life that the world worshiped, but they were robbed of. So when people try to get in family business and don't understand the pain they grew up with, it's an insult to all of us. And we must love and protect all of them individually and collectively. If it had not been for them, we wouldn't be sitting in a Sheraton hotel without a mop and a broom in our hand. I knew Dr. Abernathy when I was youth director of Breadbasket. We right down the block at the New York Hilton, they had a staff meeting. And I remember at that meeting, I said, "Well, I'm with Operation Breadbasket." I was 14. And he said, "Yes, but I'm the president of SCLC. I pay Jesse's salary." I said, "Oh." He ran that organization. And Mrs. Abernathy and him, the house was bombed first. You imagine going to bed at night not knowing if the roof's going to be blown off your children? And for anybody to walk past Juanita Abernathy without bowing down with gratitude shows you have no sense of history. She's going to be with us Saturday, but she's here today. And her daughter. Her son, Kwame. I heard Kwame say, they didn't know I was listening to Kwame said they do things that they'd hope nobody get out. But the advantage I have with Dominique and Ashley is that I'm on Instagram. I watch everything they do. So Bernice, I'll call Dominique and say, "You went to church last night?" "Yeah." I said, "It's funny, they got an Instagram picture of you at a party. Look just like you." So Ashley learned how to scrub Instagram before I get up. Well, knows Betty Shabazz, Dr. Betty Shabazz, and I very good friend. She would take me to Wells, which is a soul food restaurant uptown. And we'd get in the back and eat chicken and waffles with syrup and tell each other how we want to diet. But what she would do is grill me. Al, you can't talk like that. Speak slower. Talk lower. Punctuate that verb. I'm doing punctuation now thinking of Dr. Shabazz sitting somewhere telling me, pow, don't say it like that. You mispronounce it. She was a real teacher. James Orange. No grassroots organizer in the world was better than James Orange. Never went for a headline. I mean, I can go on and on. What I want you to understand is we owe the people on this stage. And one of the things that hurts me, I saw it as late as 3 weeks ago in Selma, and I'm not in the press here, so I'm not going to riff on nobody, is how you can praise the leaders and not extol their families that was part of them and helped them to lead. Praise Dr. King, but don't give the due respect to what he would want. And praise Malcolm, and not give the due respect to his children, 2 of which he did not enjoy a relationship because he lost his life for us. Praise Dr. Abernathy, but not make sure that every throne has Juanita sitting there with Kwame and her daughter and the other of the Abernathy children. James Orange, all of those, Joe Lowry, they paved the way, but they didn't pave it alone. They paved it with their whole family involved. And I want them to know whatever National Action Network represents, we know it's because not only of their parents, but because of them, down to each individual. And we pay tribute to them and their whole family and their mothers and their fathers, but their mothers who had to keep the home burning, the home lights burning, and make some kind of sense. Dr. Shabazz called me one day and said, what school are you putting Dominique and Ashley? And they were getting old enough to go to school. I said, we in Brooklyn, they're going to PS. She said, they must go to a private school. She paid their first 2 years of tuition. She said, because they can't go to a regular school and one of those teachers see Sharpton and take out on them some foolishness you are involved in. I said, well, it ain't foolishness. She says, foolishness you're involved in. And wrote a check and paid their way the first 2 years. James Brown paid the second 2. By then, I had a little income. I got them through the rest. So it's a family affair.
That's right.
And these families mean so much to us. This is the most important to me of these 4 days, because none of them, everybody that's coming, the President, Senate, Cabinet members, Ben Carson, bro, none of us would exist if it wasn't for these families that are up here. And I want them to know that we owe them. And every night I walk in 30 Rockefeller Center, I pray I never embarrass Bernice and Malak and Ms. Abernathy and them, because they pay the price so some of us will go. Don't ever forget, wherever you get, you didn't get there by yourself. You're not that good, but you've had goodness done for you. Let us all thank the families for what they've given us.
Thank you. I do know we do have 15 minutes. I had a whole lot of array of questions and things I wanted to ask. I want to spend more time with Bernice. I want to spend more time with Donzale. But I do know that we are a little pressed for time. But I did have a pressing question after Reverend Sharpton spoke. And this question is really generated to Bernice, first and foremost. But how would the struggle that you've seen growing up, many of whom were your parents were direct witnesses, and really sacrificed their lives really to really helping to change the world, to really set that agenda that would change the world. What's the takeaway now to teach the next generation? If you could talk to the new and next generation of leaders coming on, from a personal standpoint, what does this movement entail? Those who want to lead, what should they be prepared for and committed to doing now?
Well, I want to contextualize this from my father's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And one of the things, all right, let's do this in love. One of the things that he said in that book is the compelling need of today is to organize, the nettlesome task today is to organize our strength into compelling power. It's a very loaded statement that he wrote in 1967 because he was looking at where they were as a movement, the protests that they had undergone in the South and the changes that were made. But as he was looking forward to what he believed were going to be some very ominous challenges, that he realized that they were moving in a moment and didn't have necessarily the time to retreat and prepare for what would be much more looming and really organize themselves in a very strategic way to face these giants. And so as enormous as the problems are that we face, I think it was Albert Einstein that says we cannot solve problems on the same level that they were created. And that means it's going to take a whole different strategic mindset in looking at what we are faced with as a community and ultimately as a nation. Part of that is going to require us to figure out how we do what people in the for-profit world do, which is to merge and consolidate some efforts and coordinate much better. Because if we continue in individual silos, we're going to make very little progress. It does not mean a little might not change here and there, but the power of that movement, and I tell people all the time, yes, my father got a lot of attention, but it is not lost on me that his leadership was made possible because of the other leaders who were willing to work with him and in many instances submit their gifts and talents, who had so many gifts and talents of their own and could have done things in their own right. But they were willing to come into a structure and work together to come against these giants that they had to face. And we're going to have to consider that today as the young people are popping up. I know there's a whole new notion of decentralized leadership. There's not one face. And I don't see a problem with that, but there's always, if you look at nature and everything, there is always a leadership protocol. When you don't have a leadership protocol, you end up with chaos, because ultimately there has to be a unified decision made when you're dealing with giants. You're dealing with something small, that's fine, some little isolated incident in a small community, but when we're dealing with these national issues that we are talking about, it's really going to take that real unified and strategic effort. So that would be my advice, because strategy tied to, and I know we talk about this all the time, organizing is very critical right now. And I just leave you this because it's been resonating in my spirit for the last 3 years, and I haven't quite gotten the full revelation on it. But in Nehemiah, the 4th chapter, in the 19th verse, I think it is, Nehemiah says to the leaders and to the people, he said, the work is extensive. Do I have a witness? It's extensive. He said, and we are widely separated on the wall. That means everybody had their particular and peculiar assignment to build that section of the wall, that area that they were directly responsible for. But he went on to say, but when you hear the sound of the trumpet, come hither, come to that place, and our God will fight for us. God's power was unleashed on that movement because they were able to come hither to this one place and work collectively and collaboratively to fight against the ills that they were faced with at that time. And we're at that place once again.
And I do know, give it up, Dr. Bernice King. And I do know that we're going to meet Reverend White in the middle if you have some questions for our children of the movement. I'm sorry, there are 3 questions? Okay. If you can start forming in the aisle. But I did want to go to Jemida while we were talking about the importance of, Dr. Bernice was talking about the importance of organization and organizing. How can we better organize ourselves, those who want to get more committed to this movement, more involved? How important is the factor of organization? And if you can give some pertinent tools or more information on how we can be better organizers or more organized, being involved as foot soldiers in the movement.
I think organization and organizing is the key. When we come together, and that's the key, we have to acknowledge that there are some things that we are not going to agree on. However, if the sole purpose, if we all have the same agenda, then we can work through the petty stuff. Like Elder King said, because you went elder on us, just then. Like Elder King said, when you step into your higher calling, you've got to acknowledge that, who speaks first, who speaks last is not important as long as the message gets out. And we've got to start recognizing that we want our message to be heard. And so we got to stop reinventing the wheel, but use a new kind of wheel. Update the wheel. You have to change the tires. Every now and then you have to change the tires on the cars, although I'm not real good with that. But you have to change the tires on your car because sometimes you need a new set, but they're still tires. And so we might have to change the tires and go a different way, but we still have tires. And we just got to acknowledge that although my tires may be 16, right? And you got some other tires that have a special kind of rim on 22s. But we all got to realize that we have a common goal. We got to learn to organize. And it's all about just having stuff flow, having your message and meaning flow. We all stay on one topic. We all have a similar agenda. You got to be with a like mind. If you're about freeing the people, then my main focus is about freeing the people.
Thank you. We have a question?
I am a second grade teacher in the South Bronx, and something that I've been trying to do inside of my classroom is to have a social justice oriented classroom. So my students are talking about animal rights and human rights. Sometimes I get pushback saying oh, they won't understand, they're too young. So I just want to know a little bit more about your lifestyle of growing up, and when did you start understanding social issues, growing up being who you all are?
Kwame, you want to take that? Or, no?
When did I start?
So social injustice. Yes. When did you start understanding the social injustices that's going on in this country? At what age?
Oh, gosh. Personally, since I was born. I don't know anything other than this. And not only just being socially aware, but having an opinion on it. But I don't think a child is ever too young. I think the moment that a child can understand and can reason, and they do have an ability to reason, that they can learn right from wrong, because social justice is essentially right from wrong. And, everything builds builds from there, and it builds on that base of right from wrong. And we all know right from wrong,
Let me
and
just,
moral compass.
I want to say something about that. I could not go outside. Dr. Betty Shabazz was my mother. My first oral report before I could go outside was on Carter G. Woodson, was the person who was Black History Month, Black History Week, Black History Month. I was 7 years old. That was 1972. Thank you. Excuse me? I don't know who said that, but when you have parents, the African diaspora, the Pan-Africanists, you are taught from day one. It's not run, spot, run. It's color me brown. I grew up color me brown, not run, spot, run. And Carter G. Woodson. So when you have children or parents who are educating you from day one, this is how you have to learn. Hayward Burns was a lawyer who died in South Africa in the 90s. And they have a Hayward Burns School in Washington Heights. And this little Jewish boy, 4th grade, said, why is the President of the United States saying Africa is a country, not a continent? Understand? You get it. I was in Ohio in 1991 when someone asked me, what is it like to be the daughter of the man who killed Martin Luther King? Exactly. Exactly. Understand? It's about education and preparing your children. You can't depend on everybody educating your children. You have to educate your children yourself. And Dr. Betty Shabazz and Medgar Evers College and all the historical black colleges, we are educating ourselves. We have to educate ourselves.
One sec.
Period.
I want to speak to this because I'm a founder of a school, or we create private independent schools in the Los Angeles area. And I know that as a little child, my mother and father insisted that we understand what was happening, so that when we went to the March on Washington as little children, and I remember running around out of control, Benjamin Mays, who at that point was president of Morehouse College, pulled me over to the side and asked me, do you understand what is happening? I said, of course I do. And then he made me go sit down on the steps so that when Bernice's father spoke and he said, our 4 little children, my sister and I jumped up and down screaming because we knew what Uncle Martin was talking about. And as a founder of a school on the west side of Los Angeles, I have learned that children are never too young to know their history, African American children. And I know that I speak kindergarten through 12th grade primarily to white children whose parents are insisting that their children learn as much as possible. The Jewish family also has something called the Passover supper, the Seder that they just experienced the other day. The oldest member of the family reads with the youngest member of the family the Haggadah, where they are taught the history of the suffering of Jewish people in the world. So our children are never too young. 7, are you kidding me? They need to start knowing as soon as they know how to say mama, that's when they learn our history.
I just want to add on to that. As the youngest on the panel and as a product of going to a private school when I was younger, it was an all-black private school, and we learned about Afrocentric things and things like that. We learned Swahili from the age of 6. We learned logic, rhetoric. We were in eighth grade. Like we were reading The Art of War by Sun Tzu at the age of 13. I think that's one of the problems today with the whole education issue, and Education for Better America is here. But the problem is that we tell them, oh, don't teach them that, or don't, that's too much. But you'll be playing Love and Hip Hop in the background while your kids is doing their homework. You don't think that we learn from schools? It's not just what you're taught in the classroom is what we learn everywhere. But you put your child in a situation or an environment that is not proper actually. But we say don't talk to them about politics, because they're not interested in it, basically. And I can say to myself, I used to say, oh, politics bored me. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in it. I ran away from it. But the more you know about it, the more you listen, the more you come to the rally, the Saturday rally. I grew up in the rally every Saturday, so I had no choice but to know better. Even if I didn't care about it or care to be interested in it, if you put your child in the situation or in the proper places, like National Network or like whatever organization, or in the proper schooling, then they will know better and do better. They won't have a choice because that's all they know.
You have another question?
Hello, panel. My name is Ernesto Valdez, and I just wanted to ask you, for an aspiring leader to that next generation, what's your advice? Because sometimes I feel like we don't necessarily have a voice. Yes, we can go on Instagram now, we can speak, throw videos protesting, but it falls to deaf ear after 2 or 3 weeks. What's something that we can do as leaders and aspiring future leaders to really make sure that we don't forget the people like Eric Garner, Mike Brown, and everything like that, so we can also protest against for the future and show the future generations, hey, look, this is what we're doing, so you can follow in our footsteps and be leaders of the next generation.
I think one of the things, if I may, my dad called everybody a leader. When he met everybody, he called, hey, leader. And that's to bring out the leader in everybody. And I think one of the things that we tend to forget, and I think it was mentioned here today, is Dr. King didn't necessarily seek the spotlight. And a lot of people want to be leaders because of the spotlight. We've got to learn that you lead best as a servant. You've got to, and if you lead as a servant, then God will elevate you. This is me being spiritual. God will elevate you to your proper place in his will and in his time. So don't go in it because I want to be at the press conference behind the mic. And, you got to be on camera, because that's not the leader. That's the showman. If you want to lead, learn how to be a servant. Serve.
Last question.
Hi, my question is for everyone on the panel, and my question is, did they feel pressure growing up, or did they feel pressure to be in their parents' shadow? Everyone.
As a young person, you want to grow up and you want to experience all of the things